Hey guys, my name is Bo Yiser. I'm going to be talking to you about sawfish today. Sawfish are personally my favorite animal. I think they're pretty awesome. So it's my pleasure to sit here and talk to you about sawfish. In general today, I kind of wanted to put the focus on sawfish recognition and sawfish identification. I wanted this presentation is mostly designed for the youth and the young kids that might be tuning in out there. And I just want to make sure that by the end of this presentation, you're feeling more confident with what a sawfish looks like. And we've gone through some practice kind of comparing it and contrasting it to some other similar species that sometimes can be confused with sawfish. Then we'll sort of show a video so that we bring sawfish to life a little bit. And then we'll kind of do some summary stuff just to kind of wrap up the basics of sawfish. You can kind of consider this a Sawfish 101 presentation, so to speak. I'm Bo. I did sawfish research a long time ago, so I've carried that sawfish passion with me for many years, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. I kind of want to start, like I said, with sawfish recognition, identification. So I'm going to pull out my prop here, and I think, let me make sure that we can see everything okay. Let me back up just a bit. So this, I'm holding a sawfish. The first thing I want to tell you about this sawfish is that it is not real. So sometimes people ask us, are you holding a real sawfish? No, I'm not. This is actually a fake sawfish. But importantly, we took a picture of a sawfish a long time ago, and we were able to get a company to make a fake sawfish out of that. So everything you're going to be looking at here for the next couple minutes is actually accurate as far as what you might expect to see if you actually saw a sawfish. And I want to start, most importantly, with the saw. This is how it gets its name. So I'm going to zoom in just a hair. Hopefully you can see this pretty well. I'm going to use my shirt, I guess, as a background. It makes it look better. So this feature hanging right off the end of the face is what we call the rostrum, or it's more commonly called the saw. Okay? And so on this one side of the saw, we've got these teeth. I'm going to point at them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's several teeth that go up and down each side of the saw. And I'm going to turn it, and you can see that both sides of the saw have these rostral teeth. Okay, for lack of a better term, we would say it kind of looks like a hedge trimmer. So that is how a sawfish gets its name, because it actually has this saw on the end of its face. Now, staying with this critter, moving backwards towards the tail, right here I'm pointing at the eyeball. So on the top of the head, there's 2 eyes, and the 2 eyes are right behind this saw right here, okay? Right behind the eyes is another feature. It's hard to see here, but we'll see it maybe later in the presentation. But right behind the eye, both eyes are spiracles, and those spiracles flush water, so that helps the sawfish breathe. So keep coming down the end. You can see right here, there's a pectoral fin. It's coming out at you towards your screen. But what I really want to focus on are these fins back here. I'm going to use, let's see if I can do this. That's a little bit better. So here we have a dorsal fin. We call that the first dorsal fin, and then a second dorsal fin right here further back. The important thing with identification is that these dorsal fins are about the same height. You'll notice they're just about the same height. Now, some species will have dorsal fins that are about the same height, but it's more common for an animal to have a tall first dorsal fin and then a very short second dorsal fin. So in the sawfish, we have dorsal fins that are about the same height. And then this tail is pretty unique because it's basically just kind of flattened and level off. So with that, take that little bit of information that we just talked about on Sawfish ID, and I want to switch over to my presentation. I'm going to share my screen here. And let me grab the right slide. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen, and I want to blow this up. So let's take just a second here to talk about 3 kind of animals, 3 species that can sometimes be confused with each other. You might be watching this presentation and saying to yourself, how in the world is a swordfish confused with a sawfish? I can tell you from experience, and the reason why I wanted to spend a little bit of time focusing on this is there was a time when we fielded a phone call and we had somebody that said, hey, come down here, we have a sawfish that's washed up on the beach. And this is, I'm aging myself here, but we didn't have camera phones back then. So we had no way to say, please take a picture of it and send it to us to confirm. We got in the truck, we drove down there as fast as we could, and it turned out it was a swordfish, not a sawfish. So that's one of the reasons why I want to do this. I want to make sure that early on you're understanding some of these differences. So I'm going to use this little feature, this handy dandy feature here. This is my laser pointer. And let's just quickly talk about that sawfish one more time. Okay, so here we have a first dorsal fin that's pretty tall. We have a second dorsal fin that's about the same height. And then we have the rostrum here, the saw on the end of the face. We have rostral teeth on both sides of the saw. All right, so now let's compare that to this swordfish over here, okay? This is a swordfish on the right side of the screen. If we look at this rostrum, we notice right away there are no rostral teeth on either side of the saw, okay? Or I should say the rostrum. And then if we look at our dorsal fins, this is hard to tell. It's got a real tall first dorsal fin, but back down here it's kind of twisted. So let me add this little image here. This is a side view of a swordfish. We have a tall first dorsal fin, and we have a very, very, very tiny second dorsal fin. So clearly, just looking at the dorsal fins and looking at the characteristics of the rostrum, you can tell that a swordfish is not a sawfish, okay? So two different things. Swordfish and sawfish are not the same thing. So this is really cool. Let's pretend like the swordfish is now no longer on our screen. Let's focus right here on this saw shark and this sawfish. And I really like this illustration because they're kind of, on top of each other and we can get a good look at them. When you look at them from this side profile here, the saw shark and the sawfish look very similar. They have the same body type. But one of the questions that we love to ask audiences is a sawfish a shark or a ray? And usually when that question is asked, at least in my experience, the answers from the crowd and the audience can be split. They're not sure. Some say shark, some say ray. So we're going to take just a quick moment to talk about the difference between a saw shark and a sawfish and what makes it one a shark and one a ray. And let's start with this saw shark. The biggest identifier here is, in fact, this feature right here. It's the gills. So I'm going to circle the gills. Sam, can everybody see that? Can we see the gills and the circling? So notice where the gills are located. The gills are on the side of the head. And what you're seeing here is 5 gill slits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Gills, fish use their gills to breathe. They're able to bring water in. They're able to flush oxygen in. So they use it to breathe. And the location of the gills can help you differentiate a shark from a ray. And in the case of the sawfish down here, which is a ray, the gills, and it's kind of hard to see, but the gills are actually on the bottom of the sawfish. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 gills. Okay, so I would have to turn a sawfish upside down to be able to clearly see the gills. Whereas with a saw shark, I can see the gills visible right there on the side of the head, basically. So that is a kind of a characteristic that lets you know whether or not you're looking at a shark or a ray. You may have already also noticed a big key difference between a saw shark and a sawfish, and that is these two little features right here. Those are called barbels. And barbels are basically a sensory mechanism for a saw shark. They can use it to detect electrical impulses and things like that, and that helps them find prey. You don't see that feature on sawfish. And I've lost my pointer. Where'd my pointer go? Uh-oh. I'm going to exit out real quick. Hang on one sec. So yeah. So yeah, you can see the barbels here. And I'm going to go back to my little laser pointer. Has the barbels, doesn't have the barbels. So the take-home message from this slide is that, one of the things that we do here as biologists with the agency is we study fish populations, and we have to be good at identifying them. And looking at the dorsal fins and looking at some of the detailed characteristics, in this case of fish that all have rostrums, can clearly tell you that you're on the right track, whether it's a sawfish or not. There's other ways, and there's other things that we can talk about. Swordfish, for example, are typically found out in open ocean water. That's where you're going to find them. Saw sharks are usually in deeper ocean water. or deep seas. And sawfish are different. Sawfish are unique in the fact that you can find them in rivers, estuaries, bays, and nearshore reefs. So they're very coastal. If you happen to live on a river or near a river, this is the species that you would most likely encounter, even though it's an endangered species that we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But the idea here is to understand that, and this kind of coincides with one of the talks last week that a colleague did, Leo. He talked about field guides. You can use your field guides to get better and better at identifying these animals and being more confident. This is an image and an illustration that I found at this site, and I think I'm going to try and link it later, but either way, the presentation will have that link if you want to print it and color it later on. I want to take a second here. We basically talked about identification and how to compare it to some other animals that sometimes you can confuse a sawfish with if you're just looking at it in a book or watching it on TV or something like that. But let's liven this up just a little bit, and I do want to show a quick video clip. This is a video that was done a couple of years ago. It's called Small Tooth Sawfish on the Road to Recovery. And we were having some technical difficulties, so I won't be able to play the audio of the video. What I'm going to do is play the video, and I'll talk over it just a little bit. But what you're going to see is one of our researchers who is, and hang on one sec, I'm just going to try and share my screen one more time. One of our researchers is talking about the fact that we didn't know a lot about sawfish until we started studying them about 20 years ago. And then they're going to show a little bit of the research that they do. So let me share that video real quick. And like I said, I'm just going to talk over it just a little bit. And I apologize to the folks who are actually in this video, but this is going to be about a minute long, but this is going to bring the sawfish to you. It's going to liven it up just a little bit. So here we have Greg. He's a sawfish researcher, and he's basically explaining to his audience that we didn't know a lot about sawfish until we started studying them 20 years ago. So we had a lot to learn about them. And here you're seeing a little group of small baby sawfish that his team has caught. So he had a good day on the water. Sometimes they group up like that when they're young. And you're going to see some of the field gear that they use here just in a second. There's a net, there's some long lines. So they use those gears to try and catch sawfish. And here they're measuring the sawfish, so they're going to get the length. And they're going to determine if it's a male or female. They're counting the teeth. They want to count those rostral teeth. And they'll take genetics and blood samples too, so they can help understand population level type things. This is an actual acoustic transmitter that they're attaching to the sawfish. And I'm going to pause it right there. Greg and his team have safely caught these sawfish. They've brought them in the boat. They've sampled them quickly. They've collected the data that they want to off of them. And they have tagged it with an acoustic transmitter, which is going to let them, with other equipment, they're going to be able to track movements and be able to look at habitat use and things like that. How long do they stay in certain areas? Where do they go? And that kind of thing. And I wanted to pause this here because this is kind of neat. This is a really cool image. We haven't talked about sawfish habitat, but you can see here that Greg is in some shallow water. And as I said just a little bit ago, sawfish are coastal. You can find them in rivers and estuaries and things like that. And here you see mangrove, and he's basically releasing this sawfish where he caught it, in the same vicinity, close to shore. I can tell you just from personal experience with working with very small sawfish. And again, this one is basically a baby. This is not very old at all. They're born at about 2 feet long, and that includes the saw. Okay, and so this one is basically in its first, weeks and months of life, and he is releasing this close to shore. And usually when they're that small, they're going to stay in very shallow water, and they're going to avoid predators, and they're just going to worry about staying alive, getting as big as they can, as fast as they can, so that they can live a long life. And they will get as big as 16 feet long, approximately 16 feet. So they do get very big. If that's something that you were wondering, there you go. They get pretty big, 16 feet. So I'm going to exit out of this video real quick, and we're kind of on the back end here. But I want to go back to my presentation, and And I want to share the next slide, which is kind of where are the sawfish in Florida, because we kind of where can you find them in our state, basically. So this is just a real generic, quick glance at where you would find the bulk of sawfish in Florida. If you're up in the Panhandle and you're saying to yourself, I fish occasionally, but we fish up here and we never see sawfish, and people don't really even talk about sawfish. Well, there's probably a good reason there. The majority of sawfish that we have are in South Florida and Southwest Florida, which you can see circled, with those yellow circles. Kind of that Fort Myers, Caloosahatchee area down to Everglades National Park and the Florida Keys is primarily where you're going to find sawfish. That is not to say that you can't find them in other areas. You can find them up here. There's some researchers that are looking at sawfish that can be found or seen or migrate into Tampa Bay. And we get the occasional sightings further up the East Coast here too, sometimes in Indian River Lagoon. So, and there's been migrations, the confirmed one that went up to Georgia recently. So seasonally with warm water, they will migrate further north into Florida. But for the most part, if you're in northern Florida, it's definitely a rare occasion. It'd be a rare moment if you actually were to see one or hear about one. And I want to kind of just conclude this with I want to emphasize with our younger audience here that this is an endangered species. It's federally protected. It got listed on the Endangered Species Act in 2003. And actually, I think about a week ago, we celebrated the 17-year anniversary of being listed as an endangered species. And so this is an animal that needs a lot of protection. And sometimes we get the question, what do I do if I catch one? So those 4 bullets at the top are kind of the guideline for what to do. You want to leave the sawfish in the water. You try not, don't pull it up to shore and things like that. You want to cut the line as close to the hook as possible without endangering yourself or the sawfish. And you want to release the sawfish quickly, and you want to report the encounter. And the reporting information is helpful to biologists who are studying sawfish. And there's information down there on how to report it, phone, email, and app. And I would encourage you to I only showed a minute of that video clip, but if you want to view that, the link is down there at the bottom. It's a 5-minute video on the road to recovery, and it's a good video to watch that has more information than what I've talked about here. And with that, my presentation is finished, and I'm happy to do some questions and answers if you have some.
Thank you, Bo. We have already had one question that has come in. And the question is, how did they become endangered? And you are going to have to unmute yourself real fast because I muted you so that there wasn't an echo.
Can you hear me? Okay, that's a great question. They were overfished through just bycatch and some fishing gear, some gill netting and things like that. So they had many years of just sort of being overfished, and they also have gone through some habitat loss issues. So that's part of the protection is a net ban that has allowed them to thrive. If you think of a sawfish sort of hitting a net, that saw can get caught pretty easily. So that's helping sawfish recover at this point.
The next question is, how many sawfish do we think are left in Florida?
Ooh, that's a good question, and that is one that I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. It's an excellent question, and it might be something that somebody that's a sawfish researcher could answer better.
The next question is, are sawfish and saw sharks equally endangered?
Another one that I don't know the answer to. I don't know a lot about saw sharks. The purpose of using the saw shark today was just to try to help you understand the differences between how you can recognize one from the other. But honestly, there's not a lot known about those saw sharks because they're hard to find and they're not often caught to my knowledge. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
The next question is there an ocean predator of the sawfish, or is it mostly humans?
That's a good question. Sawfish are vulnerable when they're smaller, especially when they're smaller to some larger predators. I know that in recent years there was a documentation of a crocodile that had gone after and snagged a juvenile sawfish, and that was not here in Florida. That was in another part of the world. But here in Florida, I've seen some pictures where a bull shark has eaten a small sawfish, and I've seen, I think, lemon sharks have gone after. So sharks in general, larger sharks can go after and take down some of those smaller sawfish. So
the next question is, what is the best way to protect sawfish, and what can we do to help?
Well, the best way is to respect them. Okay, so we want to, if we happen to see one, you might, when we talk about a sawfish encounter, it doesn't necessarily mean that you caught it on rod and reel. You might have just been kayaking and you happen to see a very small sawfish near your kayak or something like that. So the best thing you can do is give it space, distance yourself from it so that you can allow it to behave normally and appreciate that moment, the fact that you're seeing an endangered species. And any encounter, whether you caught it on rod and reel by incident or whether you happen to see it while you're out, that reporting information is very valuable and it helps the biologists. So you can report the sawfish encounter.
The next question is, what do sawfish eat?
Oh, great question. They actually eat mostly fish and crabs and crustaceans, things like that. And, what we know about sawfish is, in general, is that when they're younger, they're going to use that saw to sort of sift through sand and mud and dig up some smaller prey. And then as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they can actually use the saw to swipe through schools of fish. And they'll either impale a fish on a tooth or they'll stun it just long enough to be able to eat it. But a lot of fish and crab and crustaceans, to our knowledge.
Perfect. And that is all the questions that I have in the queue, but I actually have a question for you, Bo, and that is, do